try!
Well, Stephen Halls, 2 wins for Australian Super Rugby sides on the weekend. The Rebels on Friday night, the Tars over the Force on Saturday night. But let's crack into a big issue at the moment, and that is this talk about a draft for Super Rugby players in Australia that they would go through and be elect for a draft and then get recruited to the 5 Australian franchises. What do you make of it?
Look, I'm sitting on the fence with this one only because we do need to do something to fix the Super Rugby sides at the moment, and you say that, and you've got to be realistic. Like, the Rebels are leading the Australian Conference and they haven't played that well. They've been very inconsistent. The Brumbies, every time they've been challenged by the Kiwi sides, have come up short, which is really disappointing because we expected so much. The Waratahs, well, they've had a huge transformation from playing roster last year, new coach, so that they haven't had an overly successful year, and the Force have been diabolical. The Reds, well, their disastrous start has improved a little bit, but just it's improved with performances but not results. So, yeah, no Australian side at the moment is competing well enough with the Kiwi side, so we do have to look at something. I'm just a bit concerned that a draft might, all of a sudden you put a draft and you start to tell players where they think they should be playing. The benefits that AFL have over a draft is there's no other competition in the world. So as soon as you start to put restrictions on a young guy that's from the East Coast, says, mate, you've got to go and play in Perth, he goes, up yours, I'm going to go and play in France, mate, or I'm going to Japan. And that's the risk we take with the draft. So I would like to see, I'd like to fix the rugby programs before we do so. It goes to show the Waratahs had success under a really good coaching structure the last couple of seasons, and I think we need to do that before we start looking at drafts.
What do you make of the argument, though, that you put a good player into an average side and he'll make those players around him better? Or does it work the opposite, that you would put a good player in and then he would drop off? What's your experience from that?
Well, again, I use Nick Phipps as an example. He was a good player at the Rebels, played a few test matches off the bench, was kind of Will Genny's understudy, went to the Waratahs side and surrounded by Bernard Foley, Kurtley Beale, Israel Folau, like these players, and all of a sudden Nick Phipps, he raised his level to become one of the, like he was Australia's best number 9, tit for tat with Genia for, that World Cup in last year. So I look at that as an example. You put a good player in a great side or surrounded by better players, then that player improves. But if you had to send Nick Phipps to the Western Force, I don't think he'd be playing for the Wallabies at the moment.
Does that come more from a coaching model? Say we look at New Zealand or South Africa and that centralised model, that coaching goes all the way through, that a consistent message. Is that more of an issue that we're seeing in Australian rugby?
Yeah, I think we need to get down that path, to be honest. And we have, in my opinion, a really strong Wallabies coaching framework, and that was similar to the Waratah one a couple of seasons ago, or the last couple of seasons. So I'd like to see in a nation that fights above its weight for players and talent, similar to Irish Rugby Union, you have to have control at the top. So I do think that the ARU now needs to have a little bit more control, not necessarily the ARU and the commercial side of the ARU, of course. I just mean the football side. The Wallabies need to have more of a say over who's coaching the 5 states and how they're playing, because at the moment we've got very different styles of footy that have been played out there from our 5 teams, and not many of them successful.
Well, it is a very interesting debate indeed. You can follow it all on Rugby.com.au.